others will. And Pete's got the program today, so. But let's get started. We have, I can see everyone's picture, so I know we don't have any guests or new members. So we'll move along with that. Mary's wood stove, that's nice. We lost her somewhere. There we are.
I closed the door between me and George because we were, our computers were competing with each other.
Oh, you're at George's?
Yeah, I don't have any internet or phone. I just got power late last night.
Well, you know, I went to Lowe's yesterday because the wind broke my flagpole. It wasn't the storm night. It was the wind from the next night that broke it. So go figure. But the lady that checked me out as of yesterday afternoon still didn't have any power. So I was without power
last night.
Well, I was without power for 5 hours, and it went off at 5:03 and came on at 10:10. So I was pretty fortunate.
You must have been on the main line.
We were out about a day and a half. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey there, Brooks.
Minnie and Duluth still don't have power. Won't have it till next week. Yeah.
That's terrible. I mean, you know, you learn to appreciate it.
So what people complain about most when the power goes off is that they lost their internet.
Yeah.
We're going to encourage the neighborhood to clean their refrigerators out and do a lot of soup because we don't everything's spoiled it.
Chris Martin's on here, but I haven't seen him.
This should be here if you get rid of the right side.
All right. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes? Have a second?
I approve.
Second.
We got Mary for a second, and Chris as a motion. All in favor, say aye.
Hey.
All opposed? All right. Any old business? All right.
Oh, actually, there may be. I sent a note to you and Bob about the tower over in Woodstock.
Yeah, I got you on the agenda for that, but go ahead.
Well, I don't know much about it. I don't even remember the name of the company. Do you?
Vigilant or something like that. I could look it up. I've got it in the emails, but
Just if anybody has any information about them, good, bad, or ugly.
That Diligent, the meeting program,
What was that?
is that a meeting software program?
No, this is the clock tower over in Woodstock.
Never mind.
They're trying to replace it or fix or replace. Fixing it would cost almost as much as to getting it replaced. The company that they got quotes from, I believe, is Vigilant or something like that.
yeah.
And I don't know anything about them. I was just wondering if anybody did.
And I don't remember. You know, it's been almost 10 years now. We at the bank we bought we put a tower clock up in Winder on Main Street there in Winder, and it cost in excess of $23,000. I don't know who made it or, you know, but it was expensive. So I thought that price that they got was probably pretty good, you know, for a completely new clock. But I haven't heard anything from Plant on it either. So, hey, Charles.
Good morning.
So, well, Randy, while we got you, anything on the Tuesday night group?
I passed on everything I have. Gesundheit.
I'm assuming that, even if they had thought about opening it, with the uptick, they probably will wait until after the election to open it up.
Possibly, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either.
And we were cleaning up storm stuff this week, so I didn't get a chance to call her.
Yeah, I was cleaning up too. I had just small trees, but some of those blew over, and I had tons of leaves and limbs all over my freshly painted deck. So now it's a spotted deck. It's a nice pattern. I did want to mention though. This is, let me hold this up. This is my gavel. My son-in-law last Christmas thought that a president is not a president without a gavel. So he gave me this gavel for Christmas. I used it in February. So hopefully this coming February, I'll use it again. I'd like to get a little use out of it other than Mary hitting me in the head with it. But
Not me. Not
that's
me.
right. I'm holding out hope. I guess is what I'm saying, is that we'll meet in person again in hopefully February. I think December is just foregone that we won't meet. The only thing I did get a thank you letter from National for our contribution on Carol and Bernie. We give $50 to National on each member's death. So we gave $100 to National. We did have bylaws amendment to discuss that Gary wrote. Did a great job of writing that. So I haven't gotten no one has emailed me saying, hey, I want to be president. So
You thought
but
they would?
It's amazing how that is.
You thought they would?
well, I was hoping. I was hoping that somebody would step up but they haven't. Donna, it's nothing wrong with repeating as president too. If you decided you'd like to be president. No comment. I don't.
Donna's muted.
Yeah. So anyway, the bylaws say I can't succeed myself, so we need to change the bylaws to allow me to be president for one more year, not two, just one. And I think the good thing about that is that puts us in a position where we don't have all four officers leaving at the same time. So the president would, and if we go back on a regular 2-year cycle after next year, then the president and vice president would come up for re-election or come up for election, and then the treasurer and the secretary would be in the next year. Gary?
You're muted, Gary.
Unmute your phone or your computer, Gary. And grab me a sandwich while you're up.
Hey, Dan, you said both the president and vice president would be on the same election cycle?
Yeah, I
Did
think
miss-
that's what the amendment said. Unfortunately, I don't have it in front of me. Gary might remember.
He's still
You're
muted.
Gary, press the space bar on your keyboard.
And hold it.
That didn't work. There it is.
There we go.
Yep.
No,
Nope.
You have to hold the space bar if you use space bar.
He's got it.
Okay. You got me now?
we
Yep.
got you.
Okay, this motion applies to all officers, not just the president. What it would do is it would bypass the bylaws for this one time, being that the officers cannot succeed themselves. It would let them succeed themselves for 1 year. However, anybody else who wants to run for those offices can also run. So it would allow the current officer to run again, but anybody else could run in their place for this one term. So it would allow them to succeed themselves, which the bylaws does not permit. So it would alter the bylaws for that one time for all officers, but it would allow anybody else to run if they wanted to.
Okay. Well, do I see anyone raising their hand to be president? Or vice president?
Our hands are tied. Oh,
Everyone just sitting on their hands, you know.
Dan, you're just gonna have to draft somebody.
I can see George's hand.
That's right, yeah.
It's like being in an auction.
Oh, there's Mary's hands.
there we
Oh,
go. Both hands up at once.
I'm reaching for my phone. It's dinging at me.
Oh, you want to call in your vote? Brooks, how about you? Would you be VP for a year?
Nope, I've done it 3 times. That's enough.
Well, 4th time is the charm. And this is only for a year.
No. I make a motion, we accept the amendment. You remain as president, vice president stays the same for 1 year. And we discuss it next year.
Second.
that motion, call for a vote.
All right, you got the motion.
Well,
Vote.
for discussion purposes though, you know, we don't have a vice president. So,
Oh, we don't?
well, Donald, and unfortunately Donald hasn't performed. Mary?
I've been contemplating it. If I, if I can get some help from folks, I would be happy to serve as vice president if some folks would feed ideas to me, because I'm a little bit at a loss as to who has anything they can present for us.
Well, I think we'll give you all the help you want, at least until we elect you.
Well, I'll volunteer to serve as vice president for this 1 year. Just because I know there's coordination with a speaker. Now, at least I can do that coordination piece, but I certainly would need help with ideas.
Well, and you know, you only have 5 programs, and one
If
of
I ever
which is
get my act
yours.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if I ever get my act together and finish Radium Girls, that's one right there.
Well, you know, you may be able to stretch that into 2 because, you know, we may need a recap of the beginning of the first program.
That's going to be the first half of the second program.
Okay.
I'm
I was trying
warned,
to help you. I was trying to help you out.
I'm warned
Thank
with Mary's message.
Well, we can, you know, I'm sure that we can get enough suggestions for programs for the other 4.
Well, are we gonna still do the monthly Zoom meetings next year? Or do you think we'll be back on a regular schedule?
Well, I'm hoping by February we'll be on, you know, face to face. We can meet now. I mean, the county says, you know, we're open if you want to meet. The only restriction we have is that you wear a mask. No, the only restriction they have is 6 feet apart. They don't even require a mask. But we can't, you know, I mean, if you want to do a show of hands of who wants to meet in person in December, we can do that. I mean, I'm willing. How many of you, let's see a show of hands, how many of you would want to meet in December?
I do.
3, 4,
I do.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of us.
I
They want to know if we want to meet in December.
I think I'd rather wait till
Um,
February and see what happens with vaccines by February. That would be my feeling.
Is
I
that
think
the,
if-
This December is just a dinner anyway.
Yeah.
I say we don't even attempt December. I'm like, I could just wait till the first of the year and go with the February, because I think that's all we have is the meal anyway. I think.
all right,
Yeah, this
Is
is
that-
Jim. Renee and I agree with that.
all right. Well, then we'll hold off until February. We'll get another month's rent. So, we've done, financially, we've done pretty well with that. And Charles will have the report. Moving on to,
Hey, Dan, I had one more thing, one possibility we could do, if we could get the county to get Wi-Fi, or if there is Wi-Fi there, we could do a hybrid. We could have those who want to attend, and we could do Zoom for those who can't make it there or don't want to make it there.
that's a good idea. I think the problem with the Wi-Fi is that they have it, but it's sporadic. We've tried it when Donald tried to give some presentations, and so we'd have to test it. But I can find out. I'll talk to Josh. And
Just work
see.
sideways and make it bigger.
And there's nothing that says that you can't alternate in face-to-face meetings with Zoom meetings, because your schedule for the face-to-face is 2 months, and in between you can have meetings also. Speaking as somebody who likes Zoom meetings.
Well, it would be nice to have, a joint, face-to-face for those of us who want to live on the edge, and those who want to stay home. So,
I gotta duck out for a bit. I'll be back in a while.
all right.
In person with Zoom.
Don't
I didn't
we-
hear
don't
you,
we-
Renee.
Don't we
We're gonna
still
have a
need
live
to?
meeting for those that want to attend and include Zoom.
That's what they're talking about.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about doing.
I walked into the room, sorry.
All right. Okay, well, any further discussion on the motion by Brooks to accept the amendment?
I'll second it.
All right, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Well, it passes. Undemocratically, but it passes. Congratulations, Mary, you're the new VP.
And thanks to
And-
her.
The new what?
Well, she would have to, she would be on the ballot and the vote would be next month.
Well, that's right.
Because all we've done is we have temporarily changed the bylaw so that Mary can run and that you can be president, and Charles and others, et cetera, can be their officers.
I really didn't want to give anyone a chance to think of it or think about it, but you're right. The vote should be next month, so we'll
I
do
noticed
that.
Bob's being real quiet.
Yeah, I noticed. I noticed Charles was quiet too. All right.
Bob
So-
said he'd leave for a little while and he'd be back.
I'm sorry.
Bob said he had to leave for a few minutes and he'll be back.
That's why it was quiet.
That's why it was quiet on his part.
I was talking about our current secretary who's doing a bang up job. He should be president next time.
I agree.
I agree.
I'll agree. I'll second
So-
that.
So Bob, you're already pre-elected.
Already voted.
I nominate him already for 2 years of help.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
why don't you appoint Mary to be the interim vice president since you say Donald's not really doing anything? You can get her feet wet that way.
Did they do?
All right. Well, she's well, all we've got is December, so
Well,
next
that's-
month we'll have our vote. I don't think I don't think the election's gonna be as tight as the national election on Tuesday. I think Mary will win in a landslide. I'm just predicting that.
Either that or everyone will abstain.
It doesn't matter. I'm voting for you, so that you'll win by one.
Why don't we do early voting?
Well, that's what I'd like to do, but Gary's right. December is the month that we should vote. So we'll vote on Monday. I mean, next meeting, and you know, because I'm sure there are a number of members that are just going to tune in December for the vote that don't normally appear on the Zoom. Do you think I'm right there?
Probably about 0.
You're right. You know, if there was some way that we could have donuts, we'd get more members here on this Zoom.
You could take pictures of donuts and put them on Zoom.
Yeah, that's about the only thing we could do, I guess. Let me ask, does anyone have any updates on Hank Scott and his condition? Anyone talk to him? All right. I talked to Glenn, of course, and he's doing fine. He and Dale. He had to go to the dentist last week, but otherwise he's doing fine. And he would call in, but he doesn't have a computer. So, and he's always got that flip phone, and I'm not sure if he could even use that for this. I know he couldn't get the video, but I don't know if he could even get the sound. So you know, it's a whole lot of folks like that I miss seeing, and hopefully, you know, come next year, the stuff will go away or subside somewhat. Do something. So, all right, Charles, you want to? I'm sorry.
Just along that line, perhaps our first in-person meeting ought to be primarily a social, because we'll probably have a hard time getting folks to sit down in chairs. Either that or just have a brief program. But I think the first time we get together, folks are going to be too interested in catching up with all their friends.
Yeah, and we'll have to see how the virus goes, you know, and see what the restrictions. We'll have to wear masks, and even if they have a vaccine out by then, which I don't think they will, but if they do, it's probably prudent to still wear a mask. I mean, given the age group of our club, we're pretty susceptible.
The distribution of the vaccine is going to take quite some time, and the effectiveness, it's not going to be an instant switch over, so we're going to be with this for a while.
You're right. So all we can do, we keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Jeff, Larry, it's good to see you join.
Thank you.
How's my clock stand doing?
Yeah.
It's doing well.
Still standing.
Yeah, still standing. Well, hopefully we'll get back on a Tuesday nights, and we'll see you then.
Yes.
Charles,
Yes, sir.
do you want to give your treasurer's report?
I can do that. Very easy again. There's not a whole lot that's changed. The biggest change is we got another credit from the Gwinnett County Parks, which brings now to $880.68 that Gwinnett County is going to let us have, I guess, to re-rent the building. Other than that, we still have we had a beginning balance of $17,164.11. And we had an ending balance of 17,164. So we hadn't lost any money and we haven't really gained any except from the county.
Yeah, and given our 880 credit will take us to $18,094. So
Yeah, I didn't add it. We ain't got it as far as I know.
yeah, and that's not. Yeah, it's just a credit. They'll issue us a check.
No,
But I told Mary at the county just to hold on to it because we'll be sending them a check for the difference for next year. So rather than go through the effort, it takes like 6 months, or 6 weeks to get a check. So, yes, Mary?
how many people do we have on this Zoom meeting?
17.
17.
No, that's not too bad.
That comes out.
20 people, so that's not too bad.
Well, actually, we got more than that. We've got
Renee's here.
15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20,
Jackie's here.
21. Yeah, we've got 21.
That's not too bad. Like I said, we've had have much more than that. So
Yeah,
Francis is here too.
22. All right. That's not bad. Yes, ma'am.
Have we made it official that we had discussed not charging dues for 2021? Have we made that official yet to just roll everybody forward another year?
Yes, we voted on it a few months ago, I believe. And what we've done is just said, okay, if you paid your dues this year, 2020, they moved over to 2021, and those who haven't paid will be charged for 2021 dues.
I just couldn't remember if we'd made it official.
Yeah, I think it's in the minutes.
I have to change the data. Like Dan said, if you paid 2020, you'll be moved to 2021. And if you didn't pay 2020s, you'll be moved to 2020 and still owe 2021 dues.
And when we produce name tags, it'll indicate on the name tag if you're due for it or not. All right.
So Dan, I have one other item of
Okay.
financial concern. I received a letter from Main Street Storage where we are by the convention center where we're storing all of our equipment for the conventions. And they have raised our rate from $50 to $69 a month. We paid them in advance for the full year a few months ago. I need to call them and get to the bottom of it, whether they're going to charge us an additional $19 starting now or at the end of our term, or how that's going to change, but it is going to change. So I just want to let you know that.
That's
Quite a jump.
That is quite a jump.
Well, is this the one that is this the storage unit that we moved to? It's not the one that we had for a long time.
It's the new one. It's about 2 blocks south of the center.
Okay. Well, I think we moved there because it was closer.
Absolutely.
Right.
And it was price then.
Yeah. That's pretty hefty increase. And it's a $19 increase per month?
Yep.
Yes.
Whew. All right.
That has to be shared with all the chapters, so they have to be notified.
Yeah, I think what I will do is I'll call her tomorrow and figure out what the impact is immediately. And then I'll send an email to all the presidents telling them what's going on.
Yeah, it might be time to look for one that's a little more reasonable.
Yeah, but then we gotta move all this stuff too to another facility.
Yeah.
I mean, still divided up among what, 4 or 5 chapters, doesn't mean that much per chapter.
$5. $5 a month. That's not bad.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money, divided up, but I mean, that's still quite an increase. I muted mine for a minute there when the clocks were chiming.
Yeah, I'd say a 40% increase is substantial.
All right, moving along. George, you got a groaner for us today?
Yeah, I got one. And I take it that most of our group that are on turned their clocks back last night. Maybe some other people that aren't on didn't turn them back. But this one has to do with daylight savings time that we just left. So what does daylight saving time mean in Seattle? Answer, it means an extra hour of rain.
Okay.
Ed,
If not rioting.
Now you could say that about Milwaukee and said it means an extra beer.
Well, it's like somebody said that they weren't going to change their clocks back because they didn't want to give 2020 another hour.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
Get rid of this year as quick as possible.
Along with that,
And Jackie, I applaud you for not leaving the room when he was going to do the groaner.
she'll hit me later.
That's right. All right. We're ready for the program?
We gotta mute everybody.
Do we mute individually or can you master mute us?
and we need to do the screen share.
Okay, Pete, you should be able to unmute.
Okay, share. Well, that doesn't help. There we go.
Pete, it's a little bit hard to hear you. I think maybe you're a little distant from your microphone.
Me?
Yes.
You're saying I'm hard to hear.
Can't hear it, can't hear.
Let me see if something needs to be adjusted.
Or else just lean in towards your microphone.
I've got it turned up all the way. I'll get closer. That's all I can do. It shows
Good.
on my screen that I'm getting good level, but it doesn't mean anything if you're not getting it. Okay. Now let's see if we can get back to the
Pete, your
screen.
microphone wasn't fully on. You had one more, you were 9/10 of what you could do.
Okay, we'll try again. Okay. That's all I've got. I hope you can hear me. Okay, can you understand me at all?
Yes.
Okay, we'll
Sounds good.
continue with that. Hopefully we'll make it through. The first slide is a picture of the Elliott Durfee clock when we moved it into the Holden house in Bunnell, Florida. The tubular bells are out of it, the weights are out of it, the pendulum is out of it. Those things were left at my house when we moved it up from Cocoa Beach. It's missing its top piece and its cloth feet. Well, if you try to put it into a condo with an 8-foot ceiling, it doesn't fit. And so those were lost over time. It's a massive oak case. Oak being unusual because it's much harder to work with than mahogany, which was traditional for most of the Durfee clock. Durfee was an importer. Basically, he ran an antique shop in Providence, Rhode Island, and he picked up a lot of tall clocks. This was in the 1860s, as American tall clocks as his antiques. And so he was selling them and found that he could, with an English supplier, have tall clocks that were of much higher quality. And he started out with Jonas and Sons. They were making bracket clocks at the time. And so the first clocks, tall clocks that he had nested bells for their chimes. And then in about 1886 or 87, John Harrington in England came up with tubular chime bells. Theaters were using them, and he also had a connection with J.J. Elliott of London, a clockmaker. And so Durfee orchestrated the connection between J.J. Elliott and John Harrington with his tubular bells to come up with a tall clock that had 9 tubular bells in it, 8 for the chime sequence and another for the strike. And we're talking tubular bells that were 6 feet long. And his first clock that he had with the tubular bells sold for $500. At the same time, E. Howard banjo clocks were selling for $20 and the kitchen clock for $5. So he was definitely the high-end market. Durfee had been trained in architecture, and you can see that in the cases that were designed. They have figurines in them that come from traditional history, and he had the cases made in Rhode Island. The works would be shipped from England. The tubular bells, he arranged with Harrington to have an exclusive right to distribute the tubular bells in the U.S. So that gave him definitely a foot up on the competition. And he continued that practice until the early 1990s, when it was challenged by U.S. patents, and he lost the exclusive right. And then companies like Hershey and others stepped in with the tubular bells. When I originally saw this clock and looked at the movement out of the case, I thought it was a Hershey movement. The clock was sold by a New York distributor, Theodore Starr and Company. These were agents that Durfee came up with, people like Tiffany, Bailey Banks and Biddle, Theodore Starr. He had agents around the country for these very high-end clocks. He learned that from the English Jonas and Sons, who considered him to be an agent for their clocks, and he found that that was a good way to do the distribution. So this Durfee Elliott clock is a combination of the Durfee, who never manufactured anything. He contracted to have things. He didn't have a factory himself for clockworks, but he used the very high quality J.J. Elliott movements, and the Harrington bells and the faces were made in the UK, also in England. So that combination, plus the ornate and very elaborate cases that were produced in Rhode Island, made for a very expensive and very high quality tall clock. We refer to them over here as grandfather clocks, and there's the story behind that of the song that came out about the tall clocks, calling them grandfather clocks. But they're basically English tall clocks. That's the history part. That was for George's benefit. Now we'll get into the clock itself. This clock was in a condo in Cocoa Beach, and the woman who owned it was a 5-pack a day smoker. So it had to be thoroughly cleaned inside and out. And there's some residual effects of all of that smoke and moisture. And I'll show you that on some of the pieces. There's a condition of the face when it was received. All the silver is totally tarnished. You see the carved figurines. These are angels. And the top piece that missing would have had clouds of wings or something of that nature. Okay. We put the case down, and we used Murphy's oil soap on it 3 different times to try to extract all the dirt that had worked its way into, and smoke film that had worked its way into the crevices, and the base needed to be glued back together again, and we clamped and glued that. We did not try to have claw feet made for it again. The floor that it was on was very uneven in the Holden house. Over the span of the clock, the floor dropped a 1/2 inch. And as I said, it is oak and beautiful carvings. The dial, if you've seen Hershey dials of that period, you can tell that everything about this clock and the Hershey clocks that were produced after 1908, when the patent dropped in the tubular bells, it's just like they were carbon copies of what the Elliott movement. The tubular bells, Durfee had his name, and he got a U.S. patent on it in 1887. Since he was the exclusive distributor, he had his name and the patent date put on the tubular bells. On the back of the moon dial, we see the Walter Durfee Rhode Island Providence. Since he was having these things made for him, he could have them stamped any way that he needed. The dial itself had 140 pieces, including all the nuts for the studs on the numerals and things like that. You see some numerals sitting over here at the side where they were taken off, and some of the other pieces of the silver. In the back, we have a moon dial, a nice jumper, and you see where we passed along the settings for the chimes and sounds. Here's the chapter ring without the numerals on it. You can see the extent of fingerprints, tarnish, all etched in thoroughly. It had to be completely reworked. You can't tell, but this is a polished plate. It's the angle of the light near the numerals and the various engraved pieces and little piles of nuts and bolts. And there's the finished dial after it was resilvered and all the pieces put back on. The moon dial cleaned up very nicely with Voltex soap, works extremely well. It's used by curators for museum pieces, and so it removed the smoke film off of it without damaging the painting itself. And yes, it's a beautiful piece. The jewelers that sold them, they had their, like this Theodore B. Star, New York, that was put on the placard that was in part of the dial engraving. There's the new dial painting. It was in beautiful condition once it was cleaned. Did not have to be restored. Here's a picture of the back of the clock where the movement, where we see the chime drum and the various levers to pull the hammers for the chimes. And two flies down here, you're going to see those become important later. And there's a birdie connection there. It has a single vial mercury pendulum, which makes this a rare piece. I've seen the mercury pendulums sell for $1,000. It's a rare piece. When it was through, there were 12.5 pounds of mercury in the vial. Had to get that much into it, raise the center of gravity to the point where we could get the regulator to work properly. Put a felt seal in here to help. Mercury does evaporate at room temperature very slowly, and it helps to seal it. There are pieces of the pendulum dial and suspension spring. Everything steel was rusted. Many things had to be de-rusted and re-blued. Here's the movement before it was cleaned, and you can see the hammer levers, the levers that go out to the adjustments on the face, and a pull trip. This is not a self-synchronizing type of chime sequence, so in order to synchronize it, you put it to a quarter of, and then you advance the chimes until you have the right note sequence. So there was a pull that was put on this lever, and a little ball in the case to allow you to do that. Another view of the front of the clock motion. You have a snail hidden here. And another rack here for the chimes and a rack for the strike. You'll notice all the dull appearing steel. Well, that's because it's all corroded. I talked to a couple of people in the UK, and we more or less concluded that the pitting was a result of either the chances are gas lighting that was used in the facility. So we have smoke film and moisture. So lots of rust to go around. Everything, the screw heads all had to be polished and re-glued in some cases. There wasn't a lot of gluing in this. The hands had to be rusted and re-glued. You see a fly here for this is the chime side, this is the strike side. You'll notice the leaves of the fly are kind of randomly oriented. Here they are sort of parallel. That becomes important later. Nice screws down to the seat board, wing nuts. Everything was done very heavy and high quality. The plates without anything on them weighed 11.5 pounds. Side view showing the gear train going up to drive the chime barrel. Here's pieces. Okay, we have the cable drums. They all have their own ratchet mechanisms. And the hands after they've been taken and appropriately treated. Here are the flies. Leathers, more leathers. There's a cleaned cable drum and the levers. The cording that goes through here provides cushioning for the levers. The weights are interesting. These weights are just test weights that I had. This is actually one of the weights out of the weight shell. Well, it turned out that that was rather important because it was wrapped in newspaper. And the newspaper happened to say January 8th, 1898. It does kind of date things. And that was frequently the process. They would have been shipped over here. The shells would have come with the movement, and then they would have made the lead to go in the shells here in the States. Here's one of the weight shells being polished. And there it's being lacquered in the same fixture. And there's the set of weights after they've been refinished. 37.6 ounces, I think it was. 37.12 ounces, 13.6 ounces, and 17.12 ounces. Okay. There's a fair amount of driving force. Here are the tubular bells. 1.5 inch diameter, nickel plated. I think they're brass. Where it etched through in places, I'm pretty sure I know brass. We have the chime sequence, 8 bells, and then the long tubular bell for the strike. And yes, they sound very nice. The locks, we didn't have keys. We got some appropriately styled keys, and I cut the proper pattern into the key so that it will operate the lock. The flies, after it was all put together, everything clean, lubricated, lots of driving power going up to the pallet, up to the chime barrel, for the strike hammer, for the strike, but it would stall every time it went into warning. And you ask yourself, everything's free, it's lubricated, you've got plenty of power coming up, what could be wrong? I had to work on the flies. Some of them had broken attachments and flopping vanes. And so I called my good friend Bernie and asked him, what could be wrong with this? He said, are the vanes on the flies parallel? I said, no. He said, they have to be. That was the answer. I balanced them to make sure that the vanes and everything was in balance, but they had to be set up so that the vanes themselves were parallel. On the strike sequence, I had to slow it down. In the chime sequence, I was able to, with a reasonable position of the vanes, get it to do the sequence so that it sounded good. And then I epoxied the vanes in place. We don't want any changes at that point. Here it is on the test stand after everything has been cleaned. Obviously, we can't do anything with the hammers themselves, the levers themselves, but we set them up with some restriction on them. There's a rubber band going across there to give them something to work against, since they don't have the springs of the hammers to work against. And there's the Mercury pendulum. And yes, it's a good timekeeper. Another picture with the face installed. And then we have to move it. So we mounted the movement on some 2x4s, made a little carrying case for the mercury pendulum. Here's the set of hammers for the tubes on the rack. These are springs. And of course you have to add new strings and attachments. These are crimped on where the strings, and then the little, believe it or not, eyelets that go to the clamps on the levers. Everything was done very high quality. Here's the tubular bells. They've been restrung with braided cord for attachment. My friend Roger Moses, we're at the Holden House, and we're putting the movement and tubular bells into the case. I had to have somebody. There aren't that many people in the Daytona Beach chapter who really work on clocks. They're collectors. So Roger was the person who worked on clocks that I could count on to help me install the movement back in the case. Things are big enough that you really needed to have two people. You haven't seen the hood on here, and that takes two people definitely to move. Here's somebody else putting the strings onto the hammers from the levers. And there it's all strung. This is Randy J., our chapter president, who arranged all of this. The clock came from the state. The owner lived in, and her husband who happened to be a lawyer, lived in Texas, and he was in charge of dispensing the estate, and he looked around. They knew that they couldn't really use the clock, but they wanted to have it go someplace where it could be appreciated. And the Holden House was a good fit for it at that time. It's a shame that it's such a small museum and doesn't have that much visitation, but it was a place to put it where it could be cared for, so it was transferred from the estate to the museum. Randy orchestrated all of that. He was the person the lawyer contacted, made for all the official transfer, and also helped with the restoration of the case. And there it sits. I say the floor is very uneven. This foot here is a half-inch longer than the one over here. And I made sure I went into the house to make sure there was enough support for it. That is a heavy clock. And it sounds wonderful. I wouldn't want to sleep next to it, but it is very nice. Those tubular bells are just excellent. I'm sure you've all encountered clocks with tubular bells before. The tubular bells, prior to being put into the clocks, were being used by theaters for part of their musical arrangements, and they were Durfee even sold them for applications like that in the U.S. We have West Wind down here. We have the Angels up here, and Wings in other places. You have to remember all these carvings were done in oak. This clock was written up in the bulletin in the March-April edition of 2018. Okay. And the title of the article, Prominent Hall Clock in the Holden House Museum. And it has a number of the pictures that I've shown you, plus others that Randy took He's good with the camera. And he has some nice pictures in that article. Plus he proceeded to enter most of my working log on the clock, which was several pages. And I won't go through that. You can look at that article to catch most of that detail. The part that confused me the most was it's stalling. I'm going into warning. Who would have thought that the veins of the flies would stop a clock? The other article that's very handy in looking up the Durfee history is to go back to a program by Jay Holloway in 2012. And you can find that in the archives at NAWCC. And it gives the history of Durfee and the Elliott Durfee clocks. And then there's another article on J.J. Elliott in the American Hall Clock Industry by Thomas Spittler. And that is 1996, April edition of the bulletin. It's very informative about Elliott and the English clocks. I've had bracket clocks that were done with nested bells. They're beautiful pieces. Triple fusees are a lot of fun to work with. Setting up one fusee in a clock is one thing. Setting up 3 of them is even more fun. And that is my presentation. I have to open up mics for questions.
Pete, I've got a question. What did you use to clean the dial face? Get the smoke and stuff off of it?
The dial was sent out to be resilvered. Okay, the other parts were run through, the brass parts and things were run through an ultrasonic cleaner. The numerals were tumble cleaned in clock solution as well as running through the ultrasonic. Okay. We can use tumblers with small stainless steel pins and shot to clean the brass parts, and it does a very effective job of getting in all the little crevices and things. And that's what was done for the brass parts. But as I say, the dial was sent out to be resilvered. There was somebody in southern Florida who resilvered all those parts. I touched them up when they came in. It took a little bit, and I inked in some of the places that didn't take the wax quite as well as they might have.
It's a beautiful clock.
It is a beautiful clock, yes. Pieces like that sell from anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 when they've been restored by the restorers out in Colorado. One of them went to a celebrity for $120,000.
A little bit out of my price league.
Yep, and most of us don't have ceiling time to take them.
Yeah.
They say that's missing the top piece of the cloth, otherwise it would be closer to 9 feet.
Pete, did you have to touch up the case anywhere? Were there parts or were damaged or anything?
The base of the case had separated and the back had separated. Those were all clamped and glued. Where the feet were taken off, some of the finish was damaged. And to say we went over it 3 times with the Murphy's oil soap, and then I used Minwax stain and finish to bring the color of the pieces that had been, like the base here, that's been scraped. And we went over the whole piece with the Minwax sealer stain. And it evened out the coloring and gave it a nice finish. And then after that, I used Johnson's paste wax on everything.
It's beautiful.
Pardon?
It's beautiful.
It's a beautiful piece, yeah. I wish it were in a more prominent place. At least it's protected where it is.
Yeah.
Pete, did you have to refill the mercury pendulum or did it still have its mercury? And if you had to refill it, where did you get the mercury?
I got mercury from a few different sources. I got some mercury from Bernie, and I got some mercury from somebody in the Lakeland chapter of NAWCC. I had to add about 2.5 pounds of mercury to get it up to the point where the center of gravity of the pendulum was to the point where it could be regulated to the proper tone. So you ask yourself, what happened to the mercury that wasn't there? Well, some beads did come out of it when it was transported, but not enough to justify pounds worth of recovery. A 1/2 inch is about 1.25 pounds, believe it or not. Okay, and yeah, there's still mercury around. And you do have to remember, as I said, it does evaporate at room temperature, so you need to keep it sealed. And it's not a real health problem unless you're in an extremely confined space with no ventilation whatsoever, and it sits there like that for a long period of time. You're not going to get enough mercury in the air to be a health hazard at all. Okay, but you don't want to spill it. And we didn't make a big deal out of the fact that there was a mercury pendulum in it. Some people get extremely upset by that. And there really isn't any cause for that. It's not like we're dealing with amalgams that are being heated or anything like that. And so it was temperature compensated. Of course, it's kept in a climate controlled environment. The problem that we had was that we had a hurricane come shortly after the clock was put into the holding house, and we lost power for a significant period of time. So it was not climate controlled, highly humid. And when I had to go in to make an adjustment on it, I took the face off and I had to treat flash rust on all of the steel of the levers. They've been coated with synthetic oil since then, so that should keep them from doing the same thing again.
Any more questions of Pete?
Pete, I'm looking at the TRAN book on long case clocks and standing regulators, and I'm trying to get an idea for what the pattern number for this clock is, and there isn't anything that really looks all that similar to it. The cherubs are on either side of the top.
I do have the pattern number. I don't have it at my fingertips. I think it was a pattern 11.
Pattern 11 is not shown in the book. I was just wondering what the top would have looked like. These are really ornate at the top as well.
Yes, it was very highly carved piece. I'll make a note and get that to you because I have some pictures of some comparable clocks. And I do have that. I believe I have a pattern 11.
It's a great clock.
Yeah.
So weird.
We only know of 4 of that particular pattern in existence, and the other 3 are done in mahogany.
Pete, what makes mahogany easier than oak? Is it just the hardness of the wood?
Primarily, yes. Oak is significantly harder than mahogany. They actually used to use mahogany in high school shops because it was a hardwood that was easy to machine. That was a long time ago. When we get to maple, cherry is right up there being hard. maples that can be very hard. George can speak more to the various hardwoods and how difficult they are to machine. George, would you like to answer anything about that as far as machining of various hardwoods? You'll have to unmute yourself if you're going to answer.
Yeah, give me that again about the woods.
Oak is much harder than mahogany. Maple is harder, or hard maple is. Cherry, I think, is somewhere in between. I'm not sure.
I would think so. Yeah, I would put the maple at the top.
So to have
And
the-
oak probably maple, then cherry, then oak, and mahogany in the lower.
But yes, all of these, the carvings were all done in oak, which is more difficult to machine than mahogany. And you can see it's just extremely high quality work.
Amazing to me how well all of that fits together, and because I'm assuming they're all hand carved.
They're all hand carved. There's no machine work here. It's all hand carved. It's just extremely fine cabinetry, and that was done in Rhode Island.
How much do you think the entire clock weighs?
Well, I can say that the canopy probably weighs about 45 pounds. We know that we have in weights alone another 60 pounds. I'd guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 pounds, maybe more. All that wood, yeah. It was enough to scoot it around on the floor. These two people.
Now, do they keep it wound and the chimes working?
We did that for a while. Randy belonged to the Historical Society, and he'd come in, and we wanted him, obviously he needs to warn once a week to make a movement. And the problem is that 37-pound weight, you saw the size of the drum, and you've got a little hand crank with maybe, if you're pushing it, a 3-inch lever. It takes a really strong hand to wind it, okay? You do it a half a turn at a time, and you gotta have strong hands. And most of the people associated with this museum are older than I am, and they don't have the strong hands. So I doubt that it's being wound.
Yeah, that's a shame that, it's not somewhere that it's maintained, daily.
Yep. Well, as I say, we kept it from probably an even worse fate if it hadn't been restored.
Yeah.
This is Jim Colson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I have a magnificent Jacquard St. Louis clock with not a similar case, but certainly the same quality, and it has an Elliott movement.
Yep.
And it's a setup with 9 of the cup bells and then 4 gongs, so it plays Whittingham, Westminster, and what's the other one? Anyway, it's a gorgeous clock. The dial is very similar.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that the Elliott House probably built the case as well. I think that's really, really interesting.
Well, in this particular, that one may have, Elliott made the bracket clocks with the nested bells. And the first clocks that Durfee brought in, tall clocks, and Jonas and Sons, they used the nested bell movement. It wasn't until Harrington with his patent in 1887 with the tubular bells that they went from they made the Elliott movement to handle the tubular bells. Before that, it was nested bells. Yes.
Yeah, that's what mine is now. Who made the case then?
This case was made in Rhode Island. Durfee had the cases made in the U.S. in Rhode Island.
Yeah, I wonder, like I say, mine is Muammar Jacquard from St. Louis is on the dial. And I guess that doesn't really tell me much about the case then.
What that tells you is that was the high-end jewelry that it was sold for.
Yeah.
I have a list of
They're magnificent, absolutely magnificent clocks.
Yep.
Mine fits in an 8-foot ceiling if I remove the center finial. But I'm sure it weighs 200 pounds because it has the same weights that you're talking about. The movement itself is extremely robust and just a wonderful clock all the way around.
I mean, 11.5-pound plates.
Yeah, really. Well, that was an excellent program. I thank you very much.
The jewelers that were agents for Durfee are Tiffany, Tilden and Thurber, Bailey Banks Bettles, Wright K, Boyd Park, J.J. Freeman of Toledo, Nathan Dorman of San Francisco, Theodore Starr of New York, James Caldwell of Philadelphia, Spalding and Company Chicago, Schwank, Carlston, Milwaukee, Merriman Jacquard, St. Louis.
Okay, that's the one. That's it.
Yep, and Shreve and Company, San Francisco. So all very high-end jewelry. Well, you can imagine the clock that cost more than $500.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Wonderful program, Pete.
Thank you.
Pete, I appreciate it. Any more questions of Pete?
I was just gonna say, I remember Bernie when Pete was talking about winding that clock, and I remember Bernie telling a story about this woman. I guess she was pretty well off in the Atlanta area years ago. And she had some clocks and I think some staff, but she had Bernie coming in every week to wind her clocks. And she had to be pretty well off to do that. But it was quite a story.
Well, if he had one with a 38-pound weight on it, he was earning it.
Could be.
All right. Anyone have any show and tell?
Yeah, I have a music box that I'll show you if you're interested. It's not a clock.
Sure, but your sound was fluttering there for a minute. I think it's okay now.
How's it sound now?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, I had a question for Brooks first. Were you able to find any information about the whereabouts of the governor's Howard Railroad regulator?
Yes, I talked to Byron, and he moved it. What was happening, they were recarpeting the office, so he moved it into the hall, and then when they put the carpet back, he moved it back. And his biggest fear is what he was upset about. They had taken the pendulum loose, and it was barely hanging. And I told him to warn them that that's mercury, that doesn't need to be broken. So, but he put it back where it was, so it's back where it was.
Very good.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to switch over to my iPhone and see if I can show you the music box. So hold on a second. And the meeting host will have to let me in. Bob? No, I'm still waiting. There we go. Thank you.
Lauren, you're muted.
Okay, is that okay?
That's good.
Okay, and I'm trying, let me see where my camera is. There it is. Okay, here we go. And I'm just going to walk around it and I'll start it playing. Okay, and this is a, hold on. This is a Symphonium 12-inch disc, circa 1885 music player. And this was pretty much top of the line for a table music player in that decade even. And so there's still some interesting stuff that you can get at estate sales these days. And this one also has a double comb movement on it. So it's playing on copper or steel discs that are perforated.
How many discs do you have for it? Is it just that one?
I got 11. And one of them was even my old Kentucky home, which Kathy was all excited about. And I am a Kentucky Colonel, so I was pretty excited about finding that one in the stack of hardware, software that came with this one.
Now, and you found this at a yard sale?
Found it at an estate sale, yeah.
That's a beautiful piece.
Yeah, thanks. I was pretty excited when I saw a picture of it, but I went to go see it. It was my first time in an estate sale since COVID, pretty much. And I went in a couple hours after the sale started, looked at it. I didn't know enough about it to get it working. Nobody there could show me that it worked. And so I left an offer on it, and they called me the next day and accepted my offer. I came in on, it was a Friday, Saturday sale, and I went in on, I'm sorry, I didn't, it was a Saturday only sale. I went in right before lunch to look at it and left an offer, and they called me up at 4 o'clock and accepted it. So I went back out in the rainstorm and picked it up and found that it worked.
Did you have to do a lot of refurbishing it, or was it in reasonable condition?
No, it just needed to be cleaned. Murphy's oil soap, and that was pretty much it. A lot of Q-tips.
Yeah.
And I was told on these, if they're working, don't do anything. Just leave them alone if they're working.
That has to have a serious spring in there.
Yeah, this one will run about 10 minutes. It's got a very serious spring. It probably takes 20 to 30 cranks on it. So that's my little show and tell.
Very nice.
Very nice. Yeah. Anyone else have anything?
Pete, this is Jim Colson again.
Yep.
I need to have your contact information so we can talk more about the Elliots. Email or phone number or whatever.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone have anything else to talk about, bring before the group?
I had a
Good news.
question. I had a question about the tower clock you were talking about. You were talking about a manufacturer that was doing or talked about
Yeah, the Woodstock clock.
the Woodstock clock.
Mhm.
The Daytona Beach tower clock, we had Verdin Company of Cincinnati, Ohio, were the people who supplied the new movement for that clock for us. And they do excellent work. The clock faces were redone, and the movements themselves are processor controlled. We had moved the controls to before people used to have to climb the tower in order to be able to adjust anything, and we moved the processor control to a little pump house in the ground. And so
Yeah, I think they're the one they're looking at is radio controlled, isn't it, Randy?
That's what I understand.
Yeah.
could well be. I imagine Verdin does that also. Ours, we had cable connection.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't know the details of this one, and I was hoping Clint would be on the meeting today to talk about it, but I think they're going through some review process because it has to do with the city, and so I'm sure it's not a fast. It's not on a fast track.
There are 2 or 3 companies that are active in the public clock market these days. I think Burden, Electric Time or Electric Clock, and one other. And they both post frequently on the Tower Clock site on the web, on the NAWCC web forum under Public and Tower Clocks.
The name of the company is Verdin, Verdin.
Yes, that's the company we ended up working with.
Okay.
And they're very active in the public market in working with cities and municipalities. So they know the paperwork and what needs to be done and how to get stuff done there. They're not cheap, but that's their market. And they're not having competition anymore.
Well, and yet they were saying that to restore the clock that they had, it would take just about the same amount of money, and it wouldn't have any guarantee for, the work or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, have like a 1-year guarantee rather than the 10-year warranty.
Yeah.
So,
It's like overhauling a Hermele.
yeah, essentially that's it. The works were inside of the thing were not very good. The quality of the actual tower originally wasn't really that great. I mean,
Yeah, because I think they had some leaks in the tower too, didn't they?
yeah. Bill Johnson looked inside of it. He could tell you more about it, but from the sound of it, it wasn't that great.
The updated movements that they have with self-correcting after power outages and time change and all of that make it a whole lot more convenient than the earlier movements. And usually you don't find original movements in the towers anymore. And
No.
if you're going to change, you might as well go change to something that's going to be very serviceable.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else? Well, I wish all of you a good election day. I hope if you're going to vote that you've already voted, because Tuesday is going to be around the building, I'm sure. I don't know why anyone would wait until the election day to vote, but I know people will. So if you haven't, please get out and vote. And if you have, thank you. And we'll be ready for December. Our next meeting will be December 6th.
Well, it was
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody. Have a good Thanksgiving.
another good program today. Thank you.
Good
all.
job. Pete. Good job.
Thank
Pete.
you, Pete.
Yes, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Bob. See y'all next month.